Welcome to the final session of Feedback+Jacksonville. I can't believe it's already here. So my name is Alexis Banks. I'm the Senior Manager of Learning and Operations at Feedback Labs. And in just a moment, I'm going to introduce Sanjay and Katie, our two wonderful guest speakers for our closing plenary. But first, I just want to take a moment to share that I feel really privileged and humbled to be able to moderate this closing activity, this discussion, because over the past 3 days, I have just been in awe of the people in this room and the organizations and institutions that you represent. As we talked about at the beginning, let me jump to this. People traveled from Liberia, Germany, Colombia to be here. In fact, we have 14 countries represented between online and in-person participation. Hello to our online participants. And we have 23 states represented, if you count DC, which you should. So I've just been in awe of the people in this room. But everyone, I have to let you in on a secret. As our small team was working incredibly hard to pull this off, literally bending over backwards, I have to admit there were some moments where I asked myself, is this worth it? But after this amazing 2.5 days, hearing from organizations like Ayuda Legal Puerto Rico and how they used feedback to fight evictions in a time of crisis, after hearing from organizations like Global Giving that made the really scary, brave, tough decision to kill off a darling project in response to feedback, I would say that my answer is unequivocally yes. This was more than worth it. It has been such a pleasure to be with you in person and to just feel the energy of this feedback community. As you may know, I lead our learning programs at Feedback Labs, so I spend my days talking to nonprofits and foundations, sometimes governments, about how to embed closed feedback loops in their work. So I'm obviously 100% bought in to the transformational power of feedback. But after this week, I am even more inspired and feeling even more fired up. I am leaving equipped with new methodologies like Progressive Stack, a consensus-building dialogue approach that Minority Veterans of America uses to center voices of those most impacted by systemic and structural inequities, and with more stories and examples to share, like how My Village Project has used collective bargaining to get Black-led organizations here in Jacksonville compensated for their feedback, which I'm just so excited about and can't wait to tell that story when I get back to DC. And I hope that you are also leaving here today feeling similarly equipped, similarly inspired. And so the goal of our final session today is to send you out feeling motivated and supported to continue this awesome work. So thank you for sticking around and looking forward to a really engaging final hour together. So I want to invite Sanjay and Katie, if you want to come join me up here. And as they make their way up, I'll just tell you a little bit about our final guest speakers. So Sanjay, this superhuman who has facilitated in every session today somehow. He was a table moderator this morning, just led a breakout group discussion, is now going to be speaking with you. He is the founder and director of Soul Colombia Foundation, which empowers communities to develop autonomy, collaboration, deep learning, and to solve problems together through self-organized learning supported by technology. And Katie Smith Milway is the founder and principal of MilwayPLUS, a social impact advisory. Katie is also the senior advisor at the Bridgespan Group, and previously spent 14 years at Bain & Company. Most recently, Katie's research with the PACE Center for Girls has demonstrated that feedback leads to more equitable organizational outcomes. Katie, I'm going to hand things over to you in just a moment to tell us a little bit about why you think feedback is important and what you've learned this week about our 3 summit themes. So just as a reminder, this week we were thinking about listening for change, listening through crisis, and listening beyond.
Thank you. Okay, does that work? Thank you so much. What a privilege to be here, and how exciting just to see the evolution in Feedback Labs. I first encountered Feedback Labs 4 years ago, met Dennis Whittle through some research I was doing on funding the feedback movement. And I mean, it's just amazing to see how global you are, how multi-ethnic, multi-field. It's just really, I mean, we should just give a hand to Feedback Labs for all that you've done to evolve practice and your own practice. In terms of my connection to feedback, so I did work at Bain & Company for 14 years, and I was involved, in fact, with the team that helped Fred Reichheld codify and commercialize the Net Promoter Score. But as a corporate strategy consultant, I also, we would never look at any product or service for a client without trying to understand what customers thought about it. I mean, feedback is just part of the way you do good business, good R&D, continuously improve. So when I moved over to the Bridgespan Group to lead their knowledge practice about 12 years ago, it was sort of odd to me that feedback wasn't always a consistent part of the way organizations measured their impact. I mean, monitoring, evaluation, but feedback sometimes, but it wasn't embedded. So that struck me as odd. So I was really delighted 4 years ago to get very involved with the feedback movement through the Fund for Shared Insight, connecting with Feedback Labs, and see that, and to see the growth where now I'll just, spoiler alert, tell you about a piece of research that's coming out in June has shown that actually grantee feedback is one of the top accelerators for advancing equitable grant making through encouraging multi-year and general operating support. So this is what funders are reporting is really encouraging them to change their own practice so that the impact is really, really strong. So that said, takeaways. I said I'm going to have to talk really fast because I have so many. But on the change front, something that really struck me was just this notion that we have to always re-examine our lens on feedback and find ways to listen to people who can't participate. And you cited Global Giving's aha that they weren't hearing from the folks that weren't successful in their accelerator and then had to just rethink the whole thing. And at the same time, asking ourselves, are we building the trust that begets honest answers as we move forward in our feedback journey? And all community change can only move at the speed of trust, and the feedback movement is no different. In terms of listening in crises, I was really struck by Dr. Green's stories and being, to beware the temptation when feedback loops don't work perfectly to try something new versus tweaking something tried. And she was hitting this pajama wall, it sounded like, every time she was trying to get substantive feedback on learning and persistence in school and such. But by responsiveness to small things, creating a pajama day, it bred engagement for the more important and the longer things. So just really, I think persisting and tweaking, but at the same time, in terms of listening in times of crisis, being mindful of the mental health tax on those who are listening. And I think that I've heard stories from many of you, a really compelling one yesterday from Irvin, who I don't think is still here, but just of in the wake of George Floyd, how much burden it put on Black leaders who were needing to listen to things that they had lived for a long time, but now it was basically a conversation they were facing every day. And that there's huge mental health challenges to that, and that we need to take into account and then support. And then the other thing is just the consistency in your listening, how that builds your resilience for crises. So we heard on an organizational front about how PACE was able to turn on a dime because they had these listening practices that when COVID hit, they had the names and they had ways to contact all the people that they were trying to support. And those that are connected to ongoing feedback, you have the ways you have ways to reach your participants. I think a really stark example right now, if you go to Global Giving's homepage, you'll see a Ukraine fund that they were able to set up on a dime in this current crisis that we're in, and that I've been having cognitive dissonance every day as I sort of compartmentalize through the day and then listen to the news at night. Those are some of the voices I think Allison told us we're not getting a lot of traction through the accelerator program, and you've stayed in touch with them. They were the non-US, this is a non-US set of folks that you work with, and here you've listened to them, you're connected to them, and now you're able to really do something. So anyone who's saying, what can I do for the Ukraine? If you go to Global Giving's homepage, you'll find something you can do right now. Then finally, on listening beyond, and I think it's really this journey from feedback to, input, so that once we have this healthy culture of lifting up participants as experts in their own experience, which is really the shift from evaluation that makes people subjects of a study to participation and listening that makes people experts in their own experience, that you just build out all kinds of horizons. So the participant self-confidence we heard last night from Princewana, did I say that right, Lamari? Princewana, who, not only now will advocate for herself, but she'll advocate for others who aren't speaking up. We see that it can influence policy. We heard stories about that in some of the breakouts. We can see organizational resilience, which I just referred to, and the ability to innovate. All of this is sort of coming from healthy feedback culture that's getting participant input early. And one thing I was really struck by was Ahmed's story yesterday about how feedback had become a divining rod for the Center for Employment Opportunity, in that by getting feedback when folks were very early into the program, just that act of being asked and having their opinions valued ended up being a proxy for success down the road in getting job placements, and there was statistical correlation. So there's all kinds of good that goes beyond just the actual what you hear in the feedback that we're hearing. And I think just to end, we heard this morning about Cherry Navigator trying to create a new standard of excellence for all nonprofits in feedback, which I believe will be born of annual reports, having a feedback section where all organizations report on how they listen to those they're trying to help, what they're hearing, and what they're doing about it.
Only that.
Only that. So that's a few things.
Awesome, thank you.
Did you take notes?
That you had so many takeaways. Thank you, Katie. And we know you too have been reflecting on this week and likely have a lot of aha moments to share. And so we want to actually, we had planned to ask you for some aha moments, but I actually think instead of using a poll, what we could do is simply ask for a few volunteers. We're a small crowd, those of you who stuck around, and so I'd actually love to see, are there maybe a few volunteers who'd be willing, by show of hands, to share what is an aha moment for you from this week? What is a takeaway that you are bringing back to your organization about feedback?
Not everybody at the same time.
Actually, Ashley Pratt, we actually talked about this in the last session, it's not so much the organization, it's what actions are we going to take after this, so how can we all stay connected about the feedback that we heard, the changes that we're going to make to continue to share our best practices. So that was one collective. And then Sanjay, you said too, it's not about the answers, it's about the questions. So I think as I go back to our organization at Mayo Clinic is really understanding what questions we're going to ask that's going to spark those answers.
So a couple of, I will not be able to get the soul-sucking form filling out of my head for, so Bilal or whoever actually said that phrase, you've left your mark. But the other aha has to do with Allison's presentation about killing your darlings, which, as you may know, I'm one of the founders of Global Giving, so obviously hearing this story have more than the usual resonance. But the thing that brought back to me is that Global Giving was created in reaction to an innovator's dilemma, Clay Christensen's famous story about why incumbents get sniped by innovators. because incumbents have a vested interest in the revenue flows and the business models and all the things that make them a going concern. And so global giving was a reaction to the World Bank's incumbency. And I am just so amazed to hear that global giving is able to sort of overcome that innovator's dilemma by sort of subverting its own business model and by subverting its own sort of source of practice. It's easy to continue to do things as they are. You have optimized that work. You have made it efficient. You're like getting better and better and better at doing that one thing, and that it takes a lot of effort to be willing to subvert it. But it is not just the right thing to do, but it is ultimately the smart thing to do, because if you fail to innovate, you too will go the way of the dinosaur. You know, you too will end up becoming the horse and buggy in an era of cars. So that, you know, that lesson, I think, is going to stay with me for a while.
Thank you, Mari. And I see one more. And I think, thank you, from Ame.
Thanks. For me, the key takeaway is that feedback starts with self. You have to believe in feedback to be able to apply feedback. And listening to amazing presenters, all the people who presented here, I was just amazed at how passionate everyone was. Like when Dr. Green spoke the first day, that was for me like, this is her lifestyle. She was just so cool about it. And it also, the exercise we did yesterday where we connected with one another showed the importance of believing in feedback, and that it has to start with ourselves. At Global Fund for Children, for example, if we didn't have our leader who is inspiring us, who is creating that platform for us to express ourselves, we won't be able to do the same with our partners in the field. So for me, the key takeaway is that every one of us here must believe that it starts with me. And if I don't believe in feedback, I would never be able to create that space for people to give the feedback. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Ame. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your takeaways, your aha moments from this week. And excited that so much learning did emerge over these past 2.5 days. And so now what we want to do is take some time to provide opportunities to kind of rapidly network with one another and share our lingering feedback needs and the things that we've come to realize we can offer in the feedback space. Yesterday I was talking to Sandra from Kuja Kuja, who was sharing that sometimes it can feel lonely advocating for feedback, and you might feel a little isolated doing this work either within your organization or within the community of nonprofits that you work in. And so our goal here is to demonstrate that you are part of a bigger community, that there are others that you can turn to when you have questions or you are uncertain about how to advance your feedback practice or how to advocate for this work in your organization or your community. So as I mentioned, over the next few minutes, we're going to do some rapid networking to ensure that you do leave with some of those connections. On your tables, you will see a blue and sort of orange, sort of yellow card. And so we're going to be asking you to jot down a need or an offer and find a partner on the other side of the room who can facilitate that for you. So what I'm going to have folks do is actually on this side of the room, you're going to be working on your blue cards. So the blue cards are going to be, what support do you need to strengthen your feedback work? And maybe, Sanjay, if you wouldn't mind giving an example of what a feedback need is for you at Seoul Colombia.
Yes, hello. Sorry. So, I have a really easy one. No, I'm kidding. It's super complicated. It's, so this year, I told you all I got my first grant. which is to do something which is very difficult. In Colombia, probably like most places on that map that you showed, there's a problem with connectivity, no? And feedback is much easier when you have the internet, but it's much tougher if there's no internet. So actually, we got into a challenge of trying to design a guide of solutions for people to solve their own problems to get onto the internet. But the tough trouble is, how do you get that guide of solutions to people who don't have the internet? So we are kind of looking for a feedback tool, hopefully in Spanish, or a platform that can work online and offline in different scenarios to gather data about people's connectivity challenges. Super simple, super clear. If you have it, then all my work, I don't have to do it. If you don't have it, maybe what I would ask is if you have advice on how to get that done and how to make it in an easy, sustainable way. So that's my need. It's simple.
Awesome. Thank you, Sanjay. So that's everyone on this side of the room. You're thinking about what is your feedback need right now? Based on the summit, after reflecting on the summit, what more would you like to learn? What support could you use? And then everyone on the other side of the room, I'm going to ask you to think about a feedback offer. So this is the yellow cards on your table. And if you could think about what skills, tools, or resources can you offer other feedback practitioners? And maybe Katie, can you give us an example?
So at MilwayPLUS, I and my collaborating associates can connect you to listening tools and partners, or if you need accompaniment, support your learning journey. And if you're looking to advance practice in the field, design research and think through influence strategies to actually change practice.
Thank you, Katie. So again, everyone on this side of the room, you're thinking about what can I offer others in the room related to feedback. And so in just a moment, I'm going to put a timer on. We're going to have 7 minutes to rapidly find a partner on the other side of the room. Ideally, in a dream world, your offer might match their need. Your need might match what they're offering. If that doesn't happen, that's okay. This is really an opportunity to hear from your peers. What are they looking for? What are they still struggling with? And then what exists out in the ecosystem? What types of support and offerings exist in the feedback community? For those of you who are joining us virtually, you will be automatically put in a breakout room with 2 other feedback practitioners, and you'll have the chance to discuss what your feedback needs and your feedback offerings are. And those instructions will be shared in the chat box as well. But for those in the room, I'm going to go ahead and, I think, start our timer. And so invite you to get up and find someone on the other side of the room. Okay, well, I hope you had some really good conversations, and I'm excited to give you a chance to do it again. So what we're gonna do is now switch it up. So I'm gonna try to remember this side of the room was blue. So this time you will be using your yellow/orange cards to think about what skills, tools, or resources you can offer to others in the feedback community. And then everyone on this side of the room will be asking you to use your blue cards to think about what support do you need to strengthen your feedback practice or to strengthen the feedback field. So take a moment to jot down those ideas. Okay, so I've started the timer. When you are ready and you're done jotting down your ideas, stand up and find someone on the other side of the room. And again, try to find someone who can match your feedback need or your feedback offer. Happy networking. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I hope you had some fun connecting with folks. Maybe that you've been seeing all week, or maybe that you met for the first time in this final hour. And actually, it sounds like, as Sanjay was just sharing, I was going to ask both of our speakers to maybe share an observation. What did you notice about what people need and what people can offer? Sanjay, do you want to go first?
Sure. So you remember my very simple need? So that table over there, Chrissy and Ernest, we actually started to find... Ernest? Ernest? Yeah, I was saying Ernest. No, it doesn't sound. We were figuring out the solution to my problem immediately, which is like in 7 minutes, not 14 because we went back together, because what they offered me was what I needed, so we kind of met. But it's interesting because in very little time, I have many ideas to go back to Colombia with to actually start this. And they also have a lovely volunteering opportunity for the rest of the year where they can spend many hours talking to me and giving me great ideas. But it's interesting because what I see in this is that you never know when randomly you're going to find what it is that you need. And you never know that maybe what you thought you needed is not really what you need. You need something else. So I think there's a very powerful thing in conversation and in being able to talk to somebody about what you always thought you needed and then realizing, that's not what I needed. And that's, my reflection goes to, this is not only about feedback, this is about conversation. It's not just listening, it's about being able to talk and understand each other and know where each one is at. And I remember, Ernest, you said yesterday when we were at table having lunch, one of the questions on like your personal thing is like really trying to understand where the other person is and being in their shoes. And I think that's what I feel in my aha moment. It's been like the aha moment which I've had all throughout the summit. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sanjay. And Katie, what did you notice during that activity?
I was really impressed with the level of specificity of the needs. You know, that's half the battle, is actually identifying what you need. So Lily and I had a great conversation about how to do pattern recognition of over 11,000 grants. We cracked that one. No. We actually did think about the upstream input and some ways that it could become easier. Another conversation about how do you gather feedback, what's the right tool and process with a population that has low levels of literacy. I mean, that's actually a huge issue in much of the world. And there are some great tools for that. But this kind of specificity I found really just so encouraging. People are zeroing in.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. And I also just loved seeing, I did see a lot of examples of things being on both a yellow and a blue card. So people both in need of like, what are some tips for building trust in my relationships? And then other people saying like, the thing I can offer is advice on how to build trusting relationships. And so it's just really cool to see that those needs and those offerings all exist in this space, and just the value of coming together as a community. So thank you for taking some time to do that. And so now we want to shift gears and invite you to think a little bit about your learning and reflections from the past 2.5 days, and what commitments you would like to make after the summit to continue this work. So in just a moment, I'm going to give you a chance to kind of jot down some ideas on those postcards in front of you. But first, I want to hear a little bit more from Sanjay. So Sanjay, can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned during the summit, and what you'd like to commit to do when you return to Colombia?
So I have like a formal learning and an informal learning. My informal learning, and I think it's very interesting, I've learned so much about, this is my first time to Florida, and I didn't know what life was like here. And I've learned a lot about, there's a very important conversation happening right now in the US now, and I think this is like a very interesting place where that conversation is starting to happen, and it's a tough conversation, I also think. And well, I'm a foreigner, now I get to say things which are inappropriate if they are, or I don't know, because I don't know what I'm talking about. But I do think it's one of these hopeful things which give me hope, which is people engaging in like the tough conversations of diversity, equity, and and so I've learned a lot. I've walked around a lot, the downtown area. I've seen a lot of people. I've seen different ways of living. I come from Bogota. Bogota is a very big city and also very diverse. You have poverty, you have rich, you have everything. And just seeing how this place has been a big learning of understanding where you are at and how we are all kind of in similar moments around the world. And how it is that we all have to come together to fix stuff, and we have to do it now. Now there's a sense of urgency. I think the pandemic kind of brought us all like an extra surge of energy to, let's do this now. No, I'm not going to wait for my kids to fix it, I'm going to fix it. And so that's my informal learning, and I've seen so many people doing amazing things and with such energy, aside from the fact that we have shitty leaders and we have shitty histories which we're carrying with. But then again, people are doing very interesting things to try and overcome that, and we're more good people than the bad people. That's my first learning informally. And formally, I've also understood a lot that, and this goes back to Ernest's comment at our table yesterday. So feedback is like a starting step. It's like listening is the beginning. But then we have to take the next step, which is now I not only listen to you, but I enter in dialogue with you. And we create things together. No, it's not just about, okay, what are you telling me? Okay, I'll go and fix it. I'll go and do it. No, what are you telling me? You think it's okay? I don't have to do anything else. Now it's about taking the next step in listening, and it's, okay, what do we do together? How could we answer those questions which don't have answers? How could we continue dialoguing to make those answers come up amongst us? And I think this is a really cool group to do that with. So my pledge, sorry. Quick idea. This year, I'm doing something which I'm very excited about and very scared of. Since the signing of the peace agreement with the FARC guerrilla in Colombia in 2016, this is the first time I actually get to go to set up self-organized learning environments in communities of survivors of the armed conflict. And I'm pooping in my pants, literally, about it, because I do not know what I'm going to face. So, in the spirit of our conversation yesterday on the table, I will try to understand more than listen to the 15 communities of survivors of the armed conflict and where they want to go together. I will try and understand that. And I don't think it'll be easy, but that's my pledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. That sounds incredibly hard, and I'm glad that you had the chance to be a part of this community and see examples of listening, and I also hope we'll all have the chance to hear how that goes. So as I mentioned, this is one example of what a commitment looks like, and we're going to invite you to take some time to think about what do you commit to do as a result of what you've learned at the summit. What is one action that you or your organization will take? And so there are postcards in front of you. And I'm getting a few what? Kind of blank stares. And so we did want to give you some inspiration, some ideas of what that could look like. So we have some folks in the room who we snagged ahead of time to ask if they could share their commitments with us so we can get some inspiration, some examples. So first, Bilal, are you in the room? You are over here. I'm wondering if you could share with us what is a commitment that you or Charity Navigator would like to make after the summit?
Sure thing, thanks. I commit to taking back all the good feedback fam sort of responses that we got today and actually working with the irritants to implement some of those, and also working with my Charity Navigator team to make sure that we're able to take good action on that. And then finally closing the loop back to make sure we report back to this dynamic group what we're doing with all the feedback.
Awesome, thank you. Really looking forward to hearing what that looks like. And Joshua with the Siegel Family Endowment. Would love to hear from you.
Hi, everyone. A very tangible commitment from the funder standpoint, but just committing to really drawing upon all of the information that I've learned here and gained here from everyone in networking to think about how do we continue to convince funders to really invest in listening, and doing that as part of the Feedback Incentives Learning Group presentation that we're going to have at the Grant Makers for Effective Organizations Conference in May.
Awesome, thank you. And then last but not least, of course, Mari, would love to hear what does the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund want to commit to do in Jacksonville following this summit?
So we, as funders, do the grantee perception report by CEP. It's our year to undertake it, but I am really struck by the fact that it's 2+ years between GPRs. They don't recommend you do it any more frequently, which is a long time in today's world. And so we need to, I'm committed to finding effective ways of getting feedback from our constituents in between the GPRs. It's not as easy as we should survey people, because when we survey people, we're, handsome, smart, and charming, and nothing is wrong. So obviously we need to find a better way of doing that. So the answer isn't obvious, but I'm going to look for it and hope I can report back on whether I found anything at the next summit.
Awesome. And could you share what you said, GPR?
Yes, the grantee perception report that is run by the Center for Effective Philanthropy. The reason why why we are using the grantee perception report is that they do this for all other funders, or not all other funders, but many other funders, and therefore there's a benchmark against which we can compare our answers and how we measure up.
Awesome. Thank you, Mari. So hopefully you're feeling a little inspired about what are some kind of big, bold commitments to take the time to go through all of the feedback we heard today and close the loop with this community, to find ways to listen to grantees outside of the existing feedback structures that currently exist, to present about this work at an upcoming conference. So want to give you some time to think about what would you like to commit to? What action do you want to take when you get back? And once you fill these out, do make sure to include your address, because we will be stamping them and putting them in the mail to arrive at whatever location you decide to send it to a couple weeks from now, so that you just have that opportunity to be reminded of what this experience at the summit was like. So take just a few minutes, and then we're going to come back together for our kind of final closing. So go ahead and grab a postcard and jot down some thoughts. Okay, and thank you for taking the time to do that. As you are finishing up your postcards, you can set those in the center of the table, turn them up so that we can see that you've written on them, and that way we'll make sure to snag them and, like I said, stamp them and mail them next week. And I just want to thank you all for sticking around through the final session, for engaging in this conversation with one another about ways that we can support each other as a feedback community, and for thinking about what you commit to do to continue to advance your feedback practice in this collective work. I am now going to hand things back over to Britt to close us out. Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much to Sanjay and Katie for joining us to share their final reflections as well.
Awesome, and big round of applause for Alexis as well for running that session. I hope you all did write a postcard.